Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of Crosshairs, the program at ThePrint, where we discuss the big regional or national security issue of the week. I'm joined today by Dr. Frederick Grare, a well-known scholar at the Carnegie Institution and author of several books on Pakistan, India's look east policy. And we're going to be discussing what else, given what's happening in the region, Pakistan. It's been seen as a little bit of a domestic crisis. The economy is bad, the political system is in deadlock. But Dr. Grare and I are going to be discussing some of the wider implications for this, what it means for the way the world manages a long period of crisis in Pakistan, what it means for European countries and the United States, and what it's going to mean for India and its region. So let me start, Frederick. First of all, early in the morning for you in Paris, so I'll try not to drag this out too long. But the first question is this. An astounding degree of chaos. The conventional wisdom always was that the army would come, stamp on Imran Khan, install a proxy there, and everything would go on as usual. They've locked Imran Khan up, but now seem to be deferring elections, which seems to be a sign of anxiety. Imran Khan's even won an election in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa after being locked up. The appointment of an interim prime minister seems to be dragging on, despite an announcement we had a couple of days back, or a semi-announcement. And the economy, short of a fire sale of assets, seems to be no consensus on how to take things forward. Can we count on the Pakistan army anymore, as people did for decades, to be a hegemon who would ultimately stop all crises and make things work normally?
Well, that's an interesting and difficult question, because there is no question that the army's role, or the army prestige at least, has been weakened over the past few years. And for quite some time now. And at the same time, it probably does remain the main actor on the political scene. But the overall situation has changed. What has changed is that it is no longer seen as an alternative to the traditional parties, but rather as complicit of those parties. It is itself divided internally between the pro-Imran Khan and the let's say, traditional parties and so on. And therefore, it's difficult to see where the army will go and what it will be able to achieve. Now, what we're facing today, and the reason why we can ask that question, is because we are not just longer talking of a game which is being played between the traditional players. Is between the traditional players, the army being one of them, and the larger society. And what we have seen with Imran Khan being in power is new forces being unleashed that will not go back to where they were before, and that will have to be accounted for. It's not something specific to Pakistan. This populist trend has some universal character right now, but this is also affecting Pakistan, and it creates a totally new situation where neither of the main parties can be seen as an alternative to one another, nor can they be seen really as an alternative to the army, and any of them for that matter, no matter the rhetoric. And that applies to Imran Khan himself to a large extent as well. But nevertheless, this is the novelty of the situation.
So one of the fascinating things, I think, if one takes this back a little bit, is that when Imran Khan's government was brought down, the roadmap seemed pretty clear to everyone. There would be a vote in parliament. Shahbaz Sharif would take over as prime minister, but Nawaz Sharif would also go back and form the backbone of his party. You would have people in the army who were supportive of his rule, and the courts who had been annoying the army or in various ways would be brought in line. And one of the remarkable things to my mind is not one of those things happened. As we speak, Nawaz Sharif is vacationing in Italy with his family. He's showing no signs of wanting to go back home to the heat and the dust. Within the army, as you pointed out, there's chaos with members of relatives of senior army officers being arrested. Do you think the traditional parties made a mistake by not having an election right after Imran fell and legitimizing their authority, or were they nervous about whether they could get such legitimacy even back then?
No, we do have to start from the very basic, which is the economic situation. I mean, the traditional parties inherited, the current government inherited a very, very bad economic situation, which it did hope to solve or partly solve with the help of the IMF. The IMF imposed conditions that make it impossible for the government to get the support it wanted to from it. This is now done, but this is something which has been done only last week when Pakistan and the IMF signed a $3 billion package bailout for the country. Given the situation, all the hopes that the government would come to power, solve the situation, or at least improve it significantly, and in this dynamic, win the election, simply didn't work out. And Imran Khan on his side played on that situation. It was very quickly forgotten that he too was responsible. I'm not saying that he was the only responsible for that, but he too was responsible for the situation. That was very quickly forgotten. He pointed fingers to the US, to the military, to the new government, and so on and so forth. The people just bought this rhetoric because they are basically fed up of the status quo and the existing situation. Now, what the government is trying to do, and that's, I think, the interesting part, is trying to buy time in order to just do that. That is, probably postpone the election, which are planned for November, up to next spring, probably May, based on the idea of redistricting the country based on the new census and so on and so forth. But with the idea probably to gain time in order to improve the economic situation and play on that dynamic. Is it going to work? This is something else. What we see at the same time is sort of a dismemberment of the PTI with all the main figures which had strengthened the PTI at its time of glory by joining, either being arrested or leaving the party or quitting politics at once. And that's a sign that there is political engineering at play the other way this time. But it means also that neither the army nor the government are confident in their ability to actually win those elections.
Which is the strange thing here, right? Because if you lock up your opposition, you break the main opposition party, you would expect the establishment to then feel secure about an election, saying we've got rid of the problem, now let's win an election and have some legitimacy. But they still seem nervous. What are they waiting for?
No, we may face a very interesting situation where the traditional actors, PTI, PPP, PMLN may win the election. The problem is, does it sufficient to actually run the country? What we're facing is a complete defiance of the population, or at least a substantial part of the population, vis-à-vis the entire elite, vis-à-vis the entire political apparatus. And therefore, you may very well end up with the semblance of a government, semblance of an assembly running its traditional way, but completely or increasingly disconnected from large part of the country. And that's where the real problem resides. I mean, every country has political problems, face political crisis from time to time. And what we see, again, what we are seeing today in Pakistan is not specific to Pakistan. But I mean, this disfranchisement of a large part of the population, this disconnection between the elite and the rest of the country is a very dangerous phenomenon, because where will those countries be if the PTI is no longer capable of representing them. If there is no alternative, what will they do? And that's what the question that everybody has in mind. Hence the caution that everybody is showing right now.
So moving to the larger geopolitical picture, ever since President Joe Biden came to office, we saw America maintaining a kind of arm's length distance from Pakistan. There was this slightly tragicomic spectacle of Imran Khan waiting for a phone call, as if from a spurned lover. Then that call never came. And of course, it never came to Shahbaz Sharif either. But in recent weeks, we've seen some outreach. There's been a military logistics agreement signed. There's some easing off. How do you think the United States and the United Kingdom, which has often been closer to Pakistan, are reacting to this situation? And what do you think? How do you think they want to handle this?
Because just like the Pakistani elite, they are confronted with a dilemma. They see that Imran Khan would probably bring no good to the country, and at the same time, and is violently anti-Western. At the same time, they are uncomfortable with the status quo ante, that is the military backing whatever government there is, and are uncomfortable with that. So they are trying to probably choose between two evils, and trying to assess which situation will be the least worst for them. Now, as for the initial response, I mean, it's quite clear with Pakistan's role in Afghanistan and so on, the US had no real chance of showing much sympathy for whoever was in government in Pakistan, had been helping Pakistan for no reason for years and years. And we are in this situation, but we are faced now with a situation where Pakistan's threat for a long time, which has been, our own downfall would bring no good, and so on and so forth, may actually not realize immediately, but may come to a situation where it's no longer really impossible.
Right. And do you see a possibility here that it will have been 2 years since the fall of Kabul, when our program goes on air on August the 15th. So as Indians will be celebrating independence, Afghans will be mourning the loss of their republic for 2 years. But do you feel that the United States is now again seeing Pakistan as maybe part of the solution for the stabilization of Afghanistan? Or the United Kingdom is seeing Pakistan as part of the solution, or have all those fond hopes completely gone?
No, I don't think we're anywhere between those. We are somewhere between those two extremes. I don't think that anybody believes that Pakistan is a solution to anything. At the same time, nobody wants to Pakistan really falling into chaos and bringing havoc to the region. So there is a cautious move, but even the logistic agreement that had been signed apparently there recently is a very cautious one. It's not a promise of anything really to Pakistan. It just opens the possibility for it, which is very different. So I don't think we should make too much of it. This is definitely a sign in the direction of, let's say, closer relationship again between Pakistan and the US, but we're not going back to the situation ante, at least not yet. As for the UK, it's slightly different. There is always this domestic imperative with a large Pakistani diaspora, politically active and so on, that also plays along. But I mean, this is a slightly different situation, and the UK is not a major actor in Pakistan any more than anybody else is right now, apart from China, of course.
China is exactly what I wanted to come to. And I know you've been working a lot on India's eastward relationships and the management of the rise of China and Chinese military power. One of the interesting features of this economic crisis in Pakistan was that even 2 years back, you had Pakistani politicians very confidently saying, we don't need to worry even if the Americans are upset about Afghanistan. The Chinese will bail us out in one way or the other. We are going to get all these fantastic roads and railways and power plants from the Chinese. And this is a way were well settled. But as this crisis unfolded, we didn't actually see the Chinese bringing all that much to the table. How do you explain that? And how do the Chinese really see Pakistan? Is Pakistan genuinely a strategic ally or only useful to the extent it can annoy India from time to time?
Well, I think we shouldn't confuse Pakistan narrative about China for China's politics about Pakistan. These are two different things. First of all, even in Pakistan now, this is a debate. You have seen that recently with the memo written by the State Minister of Foreign Affairs in favor of full relation with China, whereas the army is much more about balancing Pakistan relationship with the US and so on, going back to the situation, the status quo ante. But I mean, what is interesting is if you ask Chinese elites about that, and I've done that a few times, they don't trust the Pakistani army. They have full contempt for the Pakistani politician, and they see Pakistan as a mess. So what they have been doing is investing just as much as their interests were concerned and gain as much they could from Pakistan itself. But they are very cautious also about the way they invest in Pakistan. Again, this is something which is not specific to Pakistan. This is something we observe elsewhere. China doesn't want to be bound by OSCE, OCDE rules or IMF rules, but follow them very quickly as far as their analysis of the local situations are. This applies to Pakistan as well. Now, the Chinese are in a dilemma, just everybody is. They don't want an additional main problem on their southern border, and they look at the situation in Pakistan very carefully. And they have probably consented more than what was expected. And I'm not talking of what was decided within the CPEC project. I'm talking of recent move on the part of the Chinese to help the Pakistani government a little bit.
Right, they delayed, they rolled over some loans and so on and so forth. But there was no fountain of cash coming.
Of course not. Of course not.
Final question, Dr. Grare. While we're discussing all this, pretty large swathes of Pakistan's northwest collapsing into a state of anarchy, pretty much. One day it's the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan shooting up something. The next day it's an Islamic State suicide bombing. We have seen all this sort of angry talk from Pakistanis periodically that we will do this and we will do that. But do you have a sense yet of how they actually mean to deal with this self-created problem? Do you think Pakistan will eventually be pushed in the direction of having to intervene militarily in some manner, or that they will still try and cut some peace deal with the TTP and who knows, even the Islamic State, because they simply don't have the resources to fight?
Again, this is a complicated situation. I think they will avoid as much as possible to intervene into Afghanistan because they know that it's no easy task and everybody else before them has failed in doing this. So Pakistanis are no fool and they certainly have no intention to move unless they're forced into it. So they're most likely try to deal with the Afghan government to have it stop its support to the TPP. Whether the Afghan government is capable of stopping them or is willing to do them is a matter of debate. I think there is probably both an unwillingness and an incapacity to do so. And you have the additional problem of IS, where in Afghanistan, the main competitor of the Taliban is not any Western country, is not any neighbor. This is the Islamic State. So there we are. Whatever the Afghan government would do in order to stop the TPP would be countered immediately by IS. And whoever will win that game will most likely get the support of all the terrorist groups who have found shelter in Afghanistan right now. So that's the situation which is difficult to manage very difficult to manage for Pakistan. On the one side, this is difficult to manage for the Taliban government as well, in many ways.
Last question, which and I promise to leave you after this. Exactly 5 years ago, India was, again as it is now, heading into an election cycle. And a number of events were set off by a single terrorist attack in Balakot that ended up claiming a large number of lives. Prime Minister Narendra Modi felt compelled to strike across the border. He referred to it in his speech just yesterday, again, saying that he had done this. Things have been extremely quiet in Kashmir now, but as you know, there is some fear again that Pakistan is ratcheting things up just a little bit, delivering a few more weapons. There have been a handful of incidents along the line of control. Do you believe there's a real risk that things could heat up again? Or is Pakistan today, the Pakistan army, just too conscious of the potential risks of a crisis to allow that to happen?
I think it's both. I think that the Pakistani army is very conscious of the risk. And if we see right now only marginal deliveries of weapons or that kind of thing, it's a sign of this caution. And at the same time, they see a situation in Kashmir which is not exactly that stable or not as stable as expected. So they'll try to play as much as they can on local movement, helping them, but keeping a profile low enough to make sure that they don't appear as the instigator of that. So I think that the overall goal has not really changed. I think the timing is bad for Pakistan. This is not a good period. This is not the time to appear as a major troublemaker, not just in the region, but also internationally, because they're in the process of trying to restore their international image. So we're likely to have this continue for a while. I don't see any, I may be mistaken on that, but I don't see any risk immediately of Pakistan moving in a big way on Kashmir and elsewhere. Moreover, it would be much more complicated for them anyway.
Dr. Grare, thank you very much for your time. That was a really interesting conversation, and I look forward to having you back more. I know you're a little Zoom and television phobic, but I'm going to be getting you back lots, hopefully, to discuss, I think next time especially, India's Eastern challenges, which I know you have some fascinating thoughts about. Thank you for making the time this morning.
Thank you.